Buddy, thanks so much for joining. Looking forward to it. Just as we kind of get started, I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes, let a few more people kind of arrive. Hey, Donna, Megan, Troy, thanks again for jumping on. Let's just see. Sound off where you are from. Oh, you know what? That is super loud. Let me just mute that as well. Yeah, would love to know where everyone's kind of dialing in from. Where are you hailing from? I'm guessing we should all be more or less kind of based out of Phoenix. This is the Phoenix mug, but I know we have some other people joining from outside of that. Oh, awesome. Scottsdale, Kansas, Connecticut. Very cool. Very cool. Thanks so much for joining. Hey, Allie, thanks for joining. Melissa. Oh, Gracie, good to see you. Good to see you. Gracie, someone I know. All the way from Minnesota. Very cool. Very cool. And just to confirm, can everyone hear me okay? This is unlike Zoom. It doesn't have a little volume tab to indicate people can hear me. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me all right. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Troy. Appreciate that. But yeah, we'll give everyone just kind of another couple of minutes. I'm really excited to show the tool. One of the cool things that we'll be able to kind of show today, we have our own Marketo instance that we use just day in and day out. And uh, the Gen AI piece requires some disclaimers to be signed in order for you to get access, and then it's provisioned. Usually it takes about a week to get provisioning done. But thankfully, we were able to get access provisioned pretty quickly. So we'll actually be able to demonstrate in real time, not only the email editor, but also the generative AI capabilities, which are really cool. So this is going to be a nice, I think, very involved demo. And yeah, we'll be able to really kick things off in a major way. Hey, Lexi, thanks so much for joining. Would love to know where you're hailing from if you don't mind sharing. We got Kansas, Arizona, well, Tempe, and Scottsdale specifically, Minnesota, Connecticut. Very cool. Very cool. I wish I could play some background music. I should have thought of that beforehand. I'll remember that next time. Oh, San Diego. Yeah, Deborah, I think I've actually seen you join before. I'm also based in San Diego. I'm in North County, so we live in Vista, but love San Diego. Alrighty. Well, I think more people. Oh, Oceanside. So you're up the street. You're not even that far. Pretty cool. Oceanside is one of the gems of San Diego. Carlsbad, La Jolla, all those areas. Well, with that being said, I think we can go ahead and kind of get the ball rolling. People will continue to join, which is perfectly fine. But we will get things started. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into it, and we'll do some of our keeping items. Let me just confirm something really quick. Okay, perfect. So first things first, thanks so much for everyone for joining. We're going to go through a couple of the housekeeping slides as per Adobe's recommendation. We want to make sure that we cover just some of the basics. So right off the start for our house rules, no self-promotion or pitching is permitted. So just as a given, I'm not going to pitch you guys. I'm not going to promote. But if we're in the chats, if I see something, I'll kind of call it out. I don't think I've ever seen that, but for the sake of saying it, please don't contact anyone outside of the user group without their consent. We do have a LinkedIn group on LinkedIn for Phoenix Mug Marketo user group. You can feel free to join that and start up conversations there, and then network that way. And yeah, if you have a use case that you want to share, we will not share it without your consent. So I think we're pretty much covered there. The mug is being recording. We're going to end up posting this to our mug website. If you have any questions or you want like the slide deck that was presented, in this case, it's going to be a live demo, so no slide deck. You can reach out to either myself or Mikey Chavez with PushPay. He won't be able to join today's call, but typically he's the other Marketo user group leader. And then you can stay connected by going to mugs.marketo.com / or backslash, is that backslash? Phoenix-mug. And then you can set up an account. You'll get all the emails and notifications as well. And you'll be officially a chapter member. And then also LinkedIn as well if you want to join that. Just a quick update as well. We're getting close to it. If you haven't gotten your ticket for Summit, now is the best time to do it. Realistically, we're 3 weeks away. So I'm anticipating meeting a lot of folks out there. Would love to be able to meet people from our mug as well. And yeah, we look forward to kind of connecting. So with all of our housekeeping taken care of, we're going to jump right into our live demo. So Marketo engages, well, bouncing around a little bit, new email editor. Again, my name's Akande Davis. I'm one of the mug leaders here. We also have Mikey Chavez, who is a mug leader. He won't be on today's call, but I'm definitely excited to be going through everything. And just to kind of give you some background, I am technically an Adobe certified master in Marketo. It's been something I've used for a long time. Love the platform, love the tool, and definitely very excited to be talking about this new email editor and all the functionality that comes along with it. Just to kind of give you an idea of what the agenda will look like, the one thing we're going to kind of go through as we're talking about the tool, I'm going to be demoing it in real time, but I'm also going to be referencing sort of the Adobe documentation throughout the process. So just to kind of give some context there, all of what we're covering today is available on the Adobe documentation. If there's questions that comes up, I can definitely share my use case and best practice. But realistically, 90% of what you're probably going to be curious about or want some information about will be available on the Adobe documentation. But we're going to talk through email authoring, how to author email templates because they work a bit different. We're going to talk about working with Adobe Experience Manager assets if you're using that as a part of your overall suite. We'll talk about editing images with Adobe Express, which is pretty cool. We'll talk about fragments, which is the distant cousin of a snippet, if you're familiar with that. We'll talk about content locking. And also, because we got that generative AI request approved, we're going to talk about our AI assistant. At the very end, we'll end with some frequently asked questions that Adobe's kind of identified. They're pretty baseline, nothing too profound that we'll be able to pull out of that, but it'll be good to kind of cover those FAQs. And of course, we'll open it up to questions as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get into the tool itself. Alrighty, so everyone should be able to see my Marketo Engage instance. Now, the first thing I want to kind of call out as we dive into this, the new Marketo Engage email editor is only going to be available if you have Adobe IMS, which is the identity management system that Adobe's rolling out. So if you're able to log into Marketo using your Adobe ID at that first screen when you're attempting to log in, that means you've migrated over to Adobe IMS and you can now access the tool. Some other telltale signs is usually the IMS will have this new design of icons on the left-hand side. So if you see that iconography, you'll know that you have access to Adobe IMS, and that'll essentially be your kind of baseline. If you have access to IMS, you'll be able to have access to the new editor. The first thing we'll do is kind of navigate to our design studio, and here you could see where we have our new items. They've been highlighted with this nice blue bubble. So you can see right here our email templates, emails, and then fragments. The first place that we're going to start is actually going into our email itself and our email editor. And it's a bit different, and I'll kind of call out some of the differences as we're going through it. But just to kind of give a baseline, this is a totally new way of developing emails, and the process is fairly different. It's pretty significant, the difference that you're going to see ultimately between this and what Adobe has typically done. So the first thing that you're going to do when you log into Design Studio is let's create an email. There's the test email we were already working on, but I'm going to go ahead and hit create email. Now, unlike the traditional process, the first thing you do when you create a new email is you give it a name and a subject line. So I'm just going to call this Phoenix Mug Test, and I'll call the subject line the best subject line ever. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now, once the email is created, you essentially have a blank email canvas that exists within Marketo. So this email exists, right? It's a draft. It exists. There's no content, nothing like that. The defaults get populated as you would typically expect, but there's nothing different about that. On the right-hand side, you're going to notice a few different things from the setup standpoint. Left, we'll have our preview, but on the right-hand side, I want to focus on a few areas. First is the details. So we can have the name, description, then the body content, which would allow us to edit the actual email itself. We'll have the from name, from email, reply to address, our subject line, and then some of the things that we would typically see in the editor once we were working on it. So things like, is this an operational email? Do we want to include the view as web page? Do we want to disable open tracking? Do we want to add in our pre-header or our fields used as a carbon copy? These are things that we would typically expect to see within the email when we're editing it. Now they're available on this right-hand column. Up at the very top, if we navigate to properties, here's where we can find out details about the email. So when was it created? Who was it created by? When was it last updated? Another thing that you'll notice is that we have alerts up here in the right-hand corner. These alerts will tell you two different things. You'll either get an error or a warning. An error is kind of something you need to resolve before you can start working with this email or send this email out or publish the email. And you'll typically need a from name, the email body copy, obviously, and the email text as well, which is going to bring over that email text. If you have a warning, that's more so just a heads up, something you might want to consider adjusting, but won't necessarily prevent you from publishing the email. Under the More tab, we can have delete and duplicate. That's where you'd be able to find those functionalities. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do, just for the sake of kind of maybe eliminating an error, I'm going to add in my name, and then let's jump right into the email content. So here I'll hit edit email content. Now, unlike the email editor 2.0, this is actually going to open in the same window. We don't get a net new window that's opened that we edit and work from. Instead, we get our same sort of window opened. Now, there's three ways that you can create an email, very similar to the previous one. You can design it from scratch. You can add in one of your templates. So if you have a sample template that you want to start with, that's a good place to go. Or if you can import HTML. One thing to call out here, if you design the email from scratch or if you used a saved template, those templates and that design from scratch is going to give you full capability, full flexibility with the actual tool. If you import HTML, you can get the visual components of the email brought into the editor, but you are going to have limitations around what you can edit and what you can work on. So for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to jump in and use one of our existing templates that's provided by Adobe, and I'm going to click use this template. Now, once you're in the email builder, this is kind of where the cool stuff is really shown. And I'm going to try to I'm going to remove this honey pin because this is kind of a little distracting. Give me 1 second. Let me refresh really quick. Hopefully you guys can still see that. I'm getting that honey pin on the right-hand side of my screen, and it's blocking some of the stuff that I need. And yes, we will get this recording. I'll post it on the mug group directly as well. So I'm just going to navigate back to my design studio. Go to my email. Since I refreshed it, it brought me back out here. Go to my Phoenix mug test, click into the email, hit edit email content, and I'll be prompted with the same screen that was there before as well. So choose my template, use this template. All right, so now we have that gone, which is great. The first thing you're going to notice, which is pretty different and distinct from the previous email editor, is you have the option to add in structures. So a structure is essentially a container that you can load content options into. So for example, if I was to say I wanted to have a content that was, let's say, a 3-column piece of content, 3 by 3, I would drag in this structure, and then you'll see right here in the middle that it's essentially allowing me to have 3 different components in that structure. And over on the left-hand side, here's where I add in my contents. So my structure kind of gives a placeholder or a place for me to put in my content. And the content itself is going to be a distinct piece of content, whether it's an image, a button, HTML, whatever it might be. So for example, let's say that I wanted a button right here, I wanted an image in the middle, and then I wanted another button on the right-hand side. So now I have my content loaded into my structure for my columns. Now let's say that I wanted to add in more elements in every single one of these columns. I can absolutely do that. So if I wanted to add in an image on top of my button or some social iconography at the bottom, I can do that as well in that column. Now, what's cool about this is you can really drag and drop and have a dynamic sort of viewpoint on how the editor itself works. But also, when I click into one of these different values here, on the right-hand side, I can choose my options and I can adjust the settings and the styles for each image. So for example, if I want to have this show on all devices or only on desktop and mobile, if I want to adjust the styles and add in a background color or a border color or adjust the height and the width to be a certain percentage, the alignment, all of this is available very easily. Now, I can say this on the Marketo user group, I think, without making too many people upset. But if you ever use Knack, this is a very similar sort of experience to one of those more expensive third-party email editors. And it's a really powerful way to kind of manage the content. You can do the same thing with the button, the social icons. If I drag in some text, whatever it might be, I can edit it and do the exact same thing. Now, I won't get into the specifics on how flexible each one of these components can be because they can be very flexible. But the main takeaway is here, there is a lot of options available and there's a lot of flexibility available, which is really cool. And on the left-hand side, if I click on this little folder icon, I can also see how everything is structured. So I can see how many components are in each one of my structures. I can see how many columns. And if I click into it, it'll take me right to that specific item that's in that structure. Now, since we're on the topic of this email authoring process, one of the things that I want to highlight, and I was kind of expecting to maybe keep this until the very end, but I think it's worth just highlighting now, is this is where that generative AI component comes into play. It's a really powerful sort of component. So if I was to click into this text, let's say that I wanted to do a few things, right? Let's say that I wanted to edit it using this WYSIWYG editor, which everyone is fairly familiar with. And let's say I wanted to add in a token. So I wanted to say, hey, let's use a token value. I would just click on this little icon right here to add personalization. You can kind of see how that appears, add personalization. So right within that text content, I can add my personalization, and then I can choose my token values across all of the different available tokens that I have. I really like this feature, and I wish, honestly, Marketo added it sooner, even to the regular Engage 2.0 editor, because now I can choose all the different tokens that I have available. I can choose my system tokens, find the ones that I want to add in there. I can choose in my lead tokens. What value do I want to add in there? And in this case, I want to add first name. So I can go ahead and add in first name. There's custom data values that we have within our own system, which is marketing automation platform. I can add in that value as well. And then I could even hit this drop down and insert my fallback text directly into my token so that it populates before I even put it in. So I'm going to go ahead and clear these out really quick. But let's say I add in first name, choose the drop down, insert fallback text. I'll put in buddy. I call people buddy sometimes. So, hey, first name equals buddy. Now, this is something, if you're a Marketo user, it's fairly second nature to do. But imagine a brand new user being able to come in here and implement it. Right here, I've added in my token value. And then let's say I want to add in just one more piece of text. And then in this piece of text, I want to use my AI assistant to generate the text. This is probably the coolest piece, I think, of this entire sort of demo. And mind you, this is still a work in progress. You're going to get access to it. You'll be able to work through it. Don't expect this to be a flawless experience right off the gate. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to learn your inputs and what you want and your reference content. But even at its worst, it's still pretty amazing. So for your prompt, you can put in whatever you want this text to be. So in this case, I'm going to say, I would like a paragraph of text talking about how awesome Marketo Engage is. Now, once I've typed that in, I can then go to my text settings and I can choose a few different things. I can choose the buying group, the marketing journey stage, the communication strategy, and the tone. I can also choose if I want this to be longer or shorter based on a different sort of variable right there. Now, if anyone's ever worked in ChatGPT or any of these mid-journey or AI tools, this is essentially a way to simplify prompting to allow it to be way more sort of easy to use and really hone in on what you want this to actually be. So instead of giving you kind of an open-ended box where you can type in anything and maybe miss the mark several times, this is a guided experience to allow it to be pretty great. So once I have that selected, I'm going to hit generate. And then I'm going to have my text options generated for me on the right-hand side. I think it gives up to 5 different options that are provided. So right here, variation number 1, which is pretty cool, right? So ready to transform your marketing game. Marketo Engage is the must-have tool everyone's talking about. Imagining having the power to streamline your marketing efforts, engage your audiences more effectively. And then it gives me a bunch of other variations. So it looks like 4 variations here. Now, what's kind of cool about this as well is since it's a learning AI model, I can give it a thumbs up and say, hey, this is great. I like this. Why did I like it? That exceeds expectation, prompt accurately interpret, submit my feedback. And then I can also refine. I can elaborate, summarize, rephrase, use simpler language, change the tone, change the communication strategy. And then I can even put in here to add it as reference content. So down the line, if there's ever a point where I need reference content for a specific prompt, I can have it reference this one if I really like what it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and hit select, and then you can see it adds in that content right there immediately. Now, this same process is very similar when you come to, just some mass select, when you do images as well. So if I click into my image block here, which was a piece of my content, and I hit underneath this Firefly section, generate and select image, I'll be able to generate an image as well. Before we dive into the Firefly component though, I do want to call out the fact that Even without generative AI, you have some cool new features. The first of which being you can tap into your Marketo Engage assets. So if I just open up here, I could choose one of my assets. I'll choose this one and hit select. And then I can also import media if that's something that I prefer to do. Once I've chosen the content that I want to bring over, you can see it over here on the left-hand side. I can also edit it in Adobe Express. Now, the editing permissions are a bit limited. I can do a few things, right? I can't use it maybe to the extent of Adobe Express, but I can resize it, remove the background, crop the image, or convert to a PNG. What's cool about this, though, is if your organization uses an enterprise level of Adobe Express, you can actually leverage the full capabilities of Adobe Express within the tool as well. Now, again, you're not getting, this isn't Photoshop in your browser, right? There are some limitations, but again, with every limitation, I think is just the power to do more. This is a really powerful way to kind of make quick changes on the fly as needed. And, 9 times out of 10, all we need to do is really resize something or remove the background, whatever it might be. And it didn't exist before. Imagine having this in 2.0, how easy things would have been to resize an image very quickly instead of having to resize it offline, re-import it, replace the file, go back in and check. Really nice to have this in there. But from a generative standpoint, if we hop into Firefly, same sort of process. So I'll type in a group of professionals discussing new changes in the business. And let's say I have my image settings, square, that's perfect. Brand assets, I don't have any right now, but if I had brand assets, I could load them in here and choose the different assets that would be available to kind of set the reference content. And then I'll hit generate, and it's going to generate some images in the same way or similar way that it generated the text content as well. Oh, got an error here. Let me just do a group of professionals chatting, and this could be user error, so you have to forgive me. I was able to get some images generated during some previous tests. So maybe it's a process. Maybe there might be something that's pending during the provisioning. I just got the provisioning granted this morning, so just a heads up there. But that's essentially the workflow that it would allow to do, and I'd be able to drag in those generated images to have my own sort of unique take on my email. So within the email authoring process, this is pretty much the experience that you can expect. I would encourage anyone, if you don't have access to it, to get access right away. Very cool stuff. Once you have everything you'd like to have, you can hit save and close. So I'm going to go ahead and just save and close this. And then I'll have my email available with the preview right here. Now, on the left-hand side, I wanted to quickly kind of cover some cool things that exist now in email templates. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create template, and we'll call this Phoenix Mug template. And I'm going to hit create. Now, what's really cool about the email template builder, there's two things that I really do think are very valuable, and I'm going to choose this template. The first thing that I think is a very valuable sort of component of the email template is that emails, when they're created independently, can be created with the email, but they're not tied to the email template in the same way that previous emails were. So if I make a change to my email based on a template, or if I change the email to look different than the template, I'm not going to lose access to my structures and to the content functionality. All the functionality is going to stay the exact same. The only difference is going to be I'll have a different email based off of the template. So that's really powerful too. The other change that I think is really great is the fact that we can implement governance within an email template. Now, the governance pretty much allows you to do two different things. You can do content locking. So areas that we choose to be locked are areas that cannot be edited. We can have read-only access, so nothing is editable, or we can have content addition. So we can allow structures and content to be added or allow content addition only. What this will allow you to do is if you have a team that's scaling up and you want to maintain brand consistency across several groups or several marketing efforts and initiatives, content locking and governance will prevent those elements from being changed or manipulated without that express permission from the template. So for example, let's say that I wanted to choose this section right here. This has content locking enabled. It's an editable content lock. I could lock it as well, or I could even allow it to be deleted if I wanted that to be the case. Down here at the bottom, I can also define headers and footers so that they will always be at the top or the bottom of the email, despite what it is. And then I could have display options exist to show on desktop, mobile, whatever it might be. The allow delete means that they could remove the content section, and then obviously the editable means they could add content into it. If I select this structure, same kind of thing. And then I can even have my content governance at the content level itself as well. So I could use content locking, specific locking. Let me, I'll just blocking it a little bit. I can choose it to be editable. They can edit only the content, or I can have it be locked as well. And then the same sort of process of showing on all devices, which is still available on the email. But I think this is one component that is really powerful because scaling with teams while maintaining brand consistency is a really important and key structure of how the tool actually enhances the experience for email editing. Again, being able to scale across brands and teams is a pretty powerful function. And that's one of the things that we always kind of strive for, generally speaking. One other thing that we can do within the email template and the email itself, but it's worth pointing out for the email template, is that we can add in our fragments. Now, I'm going to talk about fragments here in a second, but a fragment is essentially a global piece of content that could be edited at a global level across multiple assets. It's very similar to a snippet with a few different variations. But if I had a fragment available, I could also add that into the email template itself so that a fragment was available across every email, put it as a locked item so that way people can't remove it or replace it or whatever the case might actually be. Really quick, I want to pause just to kind of answer some of the questions that were being posted. How can I make a block dynamic? How can I allow team members only a certain part? Oh, there you go. I think I answered about 30, or sorry, I think I answered about 60 or 70% of that. This would be the process of creating that. So when you create the email template, that's when the content, the governance comes into play, where you can actually set content blocks that are locked, editable, that could be deleted or added to, whatever that actually means. So we can essentially create, like, let's say that I create an email template and I have 5 different versions of a header that I want to make available. Even though you're not going to use all 5, I want to make those 5 available. We could allow delete, but have those content blocks be locked so they can't be changed. And that way, when somebody's creating an email, they can just delete the 4 headers they don't want and retain the single one that they do want. And that would allow you to do a little bit of governance from that standpoint. But yeah, to your point, all those other questions were answered, I think, in the content locking and governance. Now, to get access to the generative AI feature, you have to reach out to your customer success manager and let them know that you would like generative AI access. You essentially have to sign a waiver or I don't know the exact document. I want to be careful about the language here, but pretty much just saying, hey, we're okay with generative AI being introduced into our Marketo instance. You have permission to incorporate that, and then you'll be able to get access to the generative AI feature within the platform. And that'll be Firefly driven, so Adobe Firefly. Whatever you could typically do inside of Firefly, you'll be able to do inside of here. It usually takes about a week to get that provision once you've signed the document. My recommendation in my experience, because we were on a tight timeline for this Marketo user group, I wanted to have it available. I just submitted it directly to the Adobe support ticket, and the Adobe support rep was able to help me out. The content block dynamic, we'll talk a little bit about that, but currently the email templates and the emails themselves in the new editor do not take into account segmentation. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. That can be used still in the old email editor, the 2.0, but not currently in the new Engage editor. They do call that on their FAQs, but it's something they do have on the docket to move forward with. So the last component I kind of wanted to talk through was a fragment. So we'll create a new fragment, call this Phoenix Month fragment. And a fragment, as the name kind of implies, you can see right here, a visual fragment. It's a global piece of content that is globally governed that can be inserted into multiple email assets. So it's very similar from a design standpoint in the same way that the email builder and the email template builder exist. But like, let's say that I wanted to have a specific footer or some sort of image with my social icons, and I want this to appear across every single one of my emails that I apply it to. This fragment operates in the way of a snippet, but it has the WYSIWYG editor, so you can edit it, adjust it, make it dynamic, and it can be adjusted based on profile attribute or fields within Marketo. But essentially, it gives you global access. It's different than a snippet because it doesn't take into account segmentation. So I do want to be careful, around that. Just be mindful of that. But essentially, this is intended to be a globally accessible piece of content across all emails. How you would typically use this, or the use cases that I've typically run into, are usually for, maybe specific marketing events that might be happening. Maybe there's a section in the email that talks about blog content that needs to be dynamically updated. Maybe there's a call out for an upcoming event that needs to be swapped on future emails, but it's something we want to be consistent across all different email communications we send out. Whatever we want at a global level to be available across the board, that would be a good use of fragments. And I'm sure we're eventually going to see a lot of really cool use cases come out as people continue to use this and leverage it. But that's some of the main areas where I see a fragment really coming into play. When it comes to fragments too, it's also worth noting that these can be, essentially loaded into emails and email templates as well. Very similar. You can actually see what fragments are being used by in the same way that snippets are used by. You can edit and publish fragments at a global level. You can duplicate fragments as well. So think about it as a really tiny sort of email, essentially that you can limit in there. And one of the things that you could do as well is you can actually have the fragment inherit the style design or break the inheritance from the style design within the email as well. So if you wanted to have a different breakpoint than other ones or something to that effect, you can do that within the fragment as well. All right, so I'm going to hit save and close. And now we're at the point, I know it's like drinking from a fire hose. I want to be be mindful of everyone's time. Anthony, really quickly, I will touch on this in the FAQs to give you a nice, clear response. And in fact, let me just pull up the Adobe FAQs. But yeah, one of the things that's a little bit challenging is segmentation is not available in the new editor currently. So that's one of the areas that I tried to be mindful of as we were going through this. So really quickly, let's look at our FAQs for the actual Adobe. Couple things. Will the old email editor continue to function? If so, for how long? So the old classic email editor is going to be around throughout 2025. This is not something that'll be deprecated immediately. I would probably anticipate at some point they may change this state, but at this point, you can still use the current email editor without any problem. The existing email templates that you might have will not work in the new designer, so they cannot be referenced in the new designer. You have to create new templates with the new designer. You can import like we talked about, but you'll have limitations around the actual template itself. So you won't be able to use the new designer with your existing sort of HTML that might exist. Is there a way to enforce branding? This is kind of what we talked about with locking content sections. As a part of the new designer, you can lock styling, content, all of that stuff is pretty cool. And the styling, colors, etc., will be coming later in the year, but you can lock the content sections. There's just kind of a plug here. Will making modules for templates be more customizable and scalable? They're really great. As you kind of saw, I think it's probably one of the biggest advances in Marketo in the last few years, outside of maybe interactive webinars and dynamic chat. I really love it. Template email creation process work. You don't necessarily need HTML knowledge. You can create easily emails as much as you want. And I said don't necessarily create. You don't necessarily need HTML. You don't need HTML knowledge. You can do this out the box really well, really easily. If you have a good eye for design, I think it's a great spot. Does the new email designer support AMP language? It does not support AMP. If anyone's familiar with AMP, it's accelerated mobile pages. It's typically used for like website design, that kind of thing. I'm not sure exactly if this is something people are running into often. I've never run into it, but it's good that they called it out. The dynamic content by attribute is great, but the dynamic content by segment still work. So Anthony, this should answer your question. This only supports dynamic content by attribute, not by segmentation. So down the line, they've mentioned that they'll have it by segmentation. But if you're typically using segments within Marketo, the dynamic content will not work in that same kind of way. To answer your question, does velocity script work? It's a great question. That was actually a question that had come up during a previous demo that we did. My take on that would be the velocity script question is tied to the token language, and tokens are still available and accessible within the platform. So I would cautiously say velocity script tokens should work, but we want to do some more testing on our end as well to make sure that's the case. So optimistically, I'm saying it probably will work. Cautiously, I'm saying try it out, but I definitely wouldn't say it's a guaranteed thing because I know velocity script can be very, very unique and distinct. And then how can you tell if your Marketo Engage subscription has been migrated to the identity management system? If you log in via the Adobe Experience Cloud, your subscription has been migrated. So those are some of the FAQs that we wanted to make sure that we covered. And yeah, I know this is, a half hour, even 45 minutes doesn't feel like exactly enough time to kind of go through everything. So I want to be try to speed through it as quick as possible. The recording will be available. But with that being said, I would love to answer any sort of maybe questions that anyone might have. I'll open up the Q&A section. And sorry that I should have done this a little bit earlier, but just going solo on the management was a little bit tough. But happy to go through any sort of use cases that might make sense or talk through any sort of other scenarios that people might be kind of curious about. And I'll cue the Jeopardy music, which I will not be singing. Maybe I will. Do. Just kidding. I won't subject you guys to that. Online resources. So my best recommendation, my go-to throughout this process, if you want a really deep and thorough understanding, I would bookmark this page right here, which I just posted in the chat, which is the Experience League for Adobe that talks about the new email designer. This is going to be your best reference point, and honestly, even more than anything that I've shared, I would use that as a source of truth for any and all questions pertaining to the designer. This presentation, what I've learned, what I've been able to kind of glean, has all been from my use case in the platform, but then also the Adobe Experience League right here as well. So definitely recommend bookmarking that, using that as a really solid reference point for any changes or questions that come up. You got it, no problem. Any other questions that anyone might have? Like I said, I think it's probably one of the greatest advances in Marketo Engage in a long time. Working across different platforms and different companies, I've always loved Marketo, and the email function has always been great, but this just takes it to another level. I think it's probably the best email editor I've personally used. I appreciate the use of structure, content. One thing that we actually didn't cover, which might be kind of cool, really quickly. Oh yeah, and then sending a sample. Okay, yeah, we could cover that as well. So one thing that's pretty cool is if you click into the actual email, you can get a visibility of all your links and available tracking links on the left-hand icon with this link icon. It'll show you all the different links and all the different sections, where they link to, what's being tracked. You can choose if tracking is enabled or not enabled. You can add tags. Really cool. Like I really love this feature as well. So that was one thing that was kind of a cool situation for my opinion. To actually send your test, make sure that all your alerts are cleared. So placeholder links are empty. Okay, that's just a warning. So I can still send this out. If I come down here, you can see all my details are in here. I'm going to add in conde@gnwconsulting.com, reply to, do the same thing. And I'll hit publish. And a draft cannot be sent, so I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. Then once I have it, I'm going to click into it, and I will do my send. Oh, you know what? Apologies. Let me, yeah, we'll just hop in here. Create a draft, and then we'll click on simulate content. So here in the simulated content, I can actually add in what this would look like. So let me see. Let me see if I'm in here. Yeah, let me click add people. All right, here I am. I'll add this person, and I'll add them right there. Then once they're added in, I can see how that content is going to render for that specific person. Then at the very top, I can click on send proof, and then I can choose who I send it to myself, and then simulate as one of the two people that I've already chosen. In this case, I'll choose Akande since he's actually in the database. Send proof, and then the email proof will be sent to my inbox. You cannot change links post-dispatch. Just to answer your question directly on that one, you can have both of it versions available. The existing editor will not be, there's no plans from Adobe to shut it down, and it's going to be available all throughout 2025. So you can have the new one turned on and the existing one at the same time. It won't impact any existing emails. And we can see right here, email hit my inbox. So voila, there it is in all of its emaily glory. So here's my test right here. Proofs come in kind of the same way as they typically have as well. So not too much of a difference. All right, then you can close it out, save and close. And then if you want to publish your new draft, you hit publish draft. Very similar to the old editor or discard draft. I'm just go ahead and discard it because I don't need that. I don't need that existing draft. Awesome. Any other questions that kind of come to mind? When you're editing a newsletter, can you block others to edit at the same time? You know, I, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how that might work, but that is a good question. That's something that we could definitely test out. And if I'm understanding your question correctly, essentially, if I was in this email for Phoenix Mug test and I was working on it, could someone jump in and work on it at the same time? That's something I would like to test out. Actually, it's a really good call out. I would anticipate that they would not be able to, just because of the way one, you have the Adobe sign-on that exists, so two people can't access an asset at the same time. Generally speaking, I don't see why it would be different here, but that's a good question. We'll definitely look into that. It's a good call out. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Two people can edit, and the last one published gets saved. That's good to know. The content locks are going to be the best example of a lock that you can get. One other thing, actually, that's worth bringing up as well. When you're working with the new emails inside of a program, if you create an email within a program, an email program specifically, that email cannot be referenced outside of the email program. It's kind of a unique quirk that exists. But typically, if you wanted to pull a smart list at the global level and look at all emails that were sent, you could reference emails within email programs. You cannot do that in this case as well. Any reference to smart list or different things like that cannot be referenced outside of the email program. So kind of a unique quirk, but just a heads up on that. That is one limitation around the new email editor that they'll probably resolve at some point. But that'll be pretty much it. All right. Well, yeah, I think we're just about at time. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer. But if not, I want to thank everyone for their 45 minutes today. I know making time for these things can sometimes be a challenge. So I appreciate everyone jumping on and being able to kind of talk through it. And yeah, as always, thanks for joining the Phoenix Mug. Again, we have the mug on the website, also the LinkedIn group. Feel free to join those or hop in there if you're curious about upcoming events. Eventually, we might try to have an in-person one. I've been saying it for a year, maybe two, but eventually we'll make that happen. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being able to jump on today. Have a great rest of your day.